The Shroud of Turin is this amazing relic. At bottom, it's a piece of cloth. It shows a very faint sort of image of a crucified man.
For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has been one of the most mysterious objects in the world. This ancient piece of linen bears the faint image of a man who appears to have been crucified.
And the crucified man calls us to remember Jesus' death and resurrection.
And for generations, people have argued about whether it is the burial cloth of Jesus Christ or a clever medieval forgery. Scientists have studied it, historians have debated it, and believers have prayed before it. Yet the truth remains hidden. Could this centuries-old fabric hold the most important religious evidence in history? Or is it a clever medieval fake that fooled the world? Stay with us. History of the Shroud of Turin. First recorded in 1354, the shroud quickly became one of Christianity's most venerated relics, and its most controversial. The Shroud of Turin is a long strip of linen measuring about 4 meters in length and just over 1 meter in width. On its surface lies the faint, almost ghostly image of a man who appears to have suffered wounds consistent with crucifixion. There are dark markings around the wrists and feet, as well as on the side, which some believe show where nails and a spear pierced the body. There's more. Across the forehead and scalp are patterns that resemble blood from a crown of thorns. The earliest confirmed record of the shroud appears in France during the mid-13th century. It was displayed in a small town called Liray, where it immediately attracted attention. Pilgrims traveled from far and wide to see it, some kneeling in reverence, others whispering doubts. From the very beginning, the shroud existed in two worlds, one of faith, where it was seen as sacred proof of the resurrection, and one of skepticism, where it was dismissed as a man-made creation. Over time, the cloth passed into the hands of the powerful House of Savoy, a ruling dynasty in Europe. In 1578, it was moved to Turin, Italy, where it has remained ever since. Today, it is kept inside a climate-controlled, bulletproof case within the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. It is rarely put on public display, and when it is, thousands of people gather for a brief chance to see it in person. For hundreds of years, artists, scholars, and scientists have tried to understand how the image was made. At first glance, it is barely visible, a pale shadow on aged fabric. But in 1898, when Italian photographer Secondo Pia took the first photographs of the shroud, something astonishing happened. On the photographic negative, the image of the man appeared with far greater clarity and detail. Facial features became visible, strands of hair seemed to fall across the shoulders, and the wounds looked strikingly real. The discovery left the public amazed and added a new layer of mystery. How could a relic believed to date back to ancient times produce an image that behaved like a modern photograph, centuries before cameras existed? Since that moment, the shroud has not only been a religious relic, but also a scientific puzzle. Teams of researchers have studied its fibers, chemical makeup, and microscopic details. Some tests suggested it could be from the Middle East, based on the type of weave and the presence of pollen grains from plants found in and around Jerusalem. Others pointed out that traces of myrrh and aloes, which are substances used in Jewish burial traditions, were detected. However, a major challenge to the shroud's authenticity came in 1988, when 3 independent laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona conducted radiocarbon dating tests. The results suggested that the cloth was made between 1260 and 1390, placing it squarely in the medieval period. For many scientists, this seemed to settle the debate, pointing toward a forgery. Yet the controversy did not end there. Some experts argued that the section of fabric used for testing had been taken from an area repaired in later centuries, possibly during the Middle Ages after fire damage. This could have introduced newer fibers that skewed the dating results. Others questioned the cleaning methods used before the tests, suggesting they might have affected the accuracy. Because of these disputes, the carbon dating results remain one of the most debated aspects of shroud research to this day. Despite centuries of analysis, no one has been able to fully explain how the image was formed. There are no traces of paint, dye, or pigment that would suggest it was made by an artist's hand. The discoloration appears only on the very outer surface of the fibers, penetrating no deeper than a few microns. Even more puzzling is the fact that the image contains three-dimensional information, since the shading changes with the distance between the cloth and the body it supposedly covered. This is unlike any known artwork or natural process. Scientific investigations beyond carbon dating. Over the years, scientists have probed it with every tool imaginable: carbon dating, infrared photography, chemical testing, but every result only deepened the mystery. Some tests suggested it's over 700 years old. Others hinted at ancient origins far older. While the carbon dating results dominated headlines, they were far from the only scientific studies conducted on the Shroud of Turin. In fact, years before the 1988 tests, teams of researchers had been meticulously examining the cloth, using methods that went far beyond determining its age. Their findings painted a far more complex and intriguing picture, which was one that refused to be neatly contained by the medieval forgery theory. In 1978, a large team known as the Shroud of Turin Research Project, or STURP, was granted unprecedented access to the relic. Over a 5-day period, they used advanced imaging technology, chemical analysis, and microscopic photography to study every visible detail of the cloth. The first thing that stood out was the nature of the image itself. The image appeared only on the very top layer of the linen fibers, almost as if it had been lightly scorched or exposed to a brief, intense burst of energy. Spectroscopic analysis revealed no traces of modern pigments or binding agents that would be expected if the image had been hand-painted. In fact, when researchers scraped tiny fibers from the surface, they found that the yellow-brown discoloration forming the image was confined to just a few microns of the fiber's outer surface, which was so shallow that it could be scraped away without damaging the linen underneath. But that's not all. This finding baffled scientists because it suggested that whatever created the image had not soaked into the cloth, but had only affected its very outermost layer. Then there were the bloodstains. Detailed chemical tests confirmed the presence of hemoglobin and other blood components. Ultraviolet fluorescence photography revealed serum halos around the bloodstains, which is something invisible to the naked eye but consistent with how real blood dries on fabric. Further analysis identified the blood type as AB, which is relatively rare worldwide. Critics suggested the stains might have been artificially applied, but researchers noted the patterns matched the kind of wounds described in the biblical accounts of crucifixion, down to the placement of nail wounds in the wrists and feet and a puncture wound in the side. Microscopic pollen analysis provided another layer of intrigue. Botanists identified pollen grains embedded in the fibers from plants native not only to Europe, but also to the Middle East, specifically species that grow in and around Jerusalem. Some of these plants bloom only in the spring, which aligns with the time of year the crucifixion is said to have occurred. If the shroud were purely a medieval creation, how could it contain botanical traces from a region thousands of miles away? Even more puzzling was the image's three-dimensional properties. When scientists fed high-resolution photographs of the shroud into a device called a VP8 image analyzer, which was a technology originally developed by NASA, they discovered that the image contained depth information. Unlike ordinary photographs, which flatten an object onto a single plane, the shroud's image could be translated into a relief map, showing accurate spatial contours of the man's body. This is something that no known artistic method from the medieval period could have produced. All of these findings hinted at a process of image formation that science could not easily explain. Was it a natural chemical reaction? A burst of radiation? Something else entirely? These unanswered questions kept researchers returning to the shroud, looking for new ways to analyze it without causing damage. Decades later, with the rise of artificial intelligence, they would find a new set of tools capable of uncovering details invisible to the human eye, and those details would reignite the debate in ways no one expected. The role of artificial intelligence. For centuries, the Shroud of Turin had been examined by the sharpest human minds and the most advanced scientific tools of their time. Yet, despite all the studies, the image remained a mystery. By the early 21st century, scientists began to realize that traditional methods, microscopes, spectroscopy, and even chemical analysis had reached their limits. There were details hidden in the fabric that could not be fully understood without seeing the image in a completely new way. That is when artificial intelligence entered the story. AI brought with it the ability to process vast amounts of data, recognize patterns invisible to the human eye, and reconstruct missing details with extraordinary precision. Researchers began feeding the shroud's high-resolution photographs, infrared scans, ultraviolet images, and spectral data into deep learning algorithms. The goal was simple but ambitious: to let AI sift through layers of information and identify patterns no human could detect on their own. At first, the AI's work seemed to confirm what scientists already knew, which is that the cloth bore the faint front and back images of a crucified man. But as the algorithms processed the data, they began to uncover subtleties that had never been seen before. The AI could enhance the faintest fibers of the image without altering their authenticity. This revealed sharper outlines of the face, hands, and wounds, making the image more lifelike than any previous photograph. The most shocking discovery came when the AI analyzed the shading and texture at the microscopic level. It detected a subtle consistency in the way the image was formed across the cloth, suggesting a single instantaneous event had imprinted it. This was not the gradual staining or painting one would expect from a human artist. It was as if the image had been burned onto the surface in a fraction of a second. Even more puzzling, the energy source responsible for this did not seem to penetrate the fibers deeply. The effect was limited to their very outermost layers, just as earlier studies had shown. When the AI reconstructed the image in 3 dimensions, the result left researchers stunned. It revealed not only depth and contour, but also minute anatomical details. Swelling in the face consistent with blunt force trauma, the strained positioning of the hands as if bound, and tiny abrasions on the knees that matched someone falling forward onto rough ground. These were details so precise that they could not have been invented by a medieval artist, especially one without modern anatomical knowledge. Another layer of analysis examined the blood patterns in ultra-high resolution. AI confirmed the earlier identification of AB blood type, but also detected traces of substances associated with severe physical stress and trauma, such as elevated bilirubin levels, which could account for the unusual reddish color of the bloodstains. The algorithms even traced the directional flow of the blood, showing patterns that aligned perfectly with gravity and body positioning during crucifixion. Perhaps the most breathtaking revelation was when AI compared the shroud's facial image to known historical and cultural depictions of Jesus from ancient times. The match was not exact, since no one could claim it was a perfect portrait, but the similarities in facial proportions, hair length, and beard shape were striking enough to rekindle debates about whether the shroud could truly be the burial cloth of Christ. For scientists, AI did not solve the mystery, but deepened it. The technology revealed that the shroud's image was even more complex than previously believed, layered with details and features that defied simple explanation. And while skeptics still argued for a medieval origin, the AI's findings made it clear.
And so what's fascinating is because there's 3-dimensional information in the cloth, they used AI to create a 3-dimensional model of the person that was buried in that cloth.
If the shroud was a forgery, it was created using techniques that even today's most advanced imaging experts struggle to replicate. The AI had opened a new chapter in the shroud's story, one that blurred the line between science, history, and faith. But it also raised an unsettling question. If this image was truly formed in an instant, what kind of event could leave such a perfect and unalterable imprint on cloth? Theories about how the image was formed. The AI's revelations forced scientists and historians to revisit the oldest and most heated question about the Shroud of Turin. How was the image created? For decades, the debate had been stuck between two dominant camps: those who believed it was a miraculous relic from the time of Jesus, and those who argued it was a clever medieval forgery. But with the new data from AI, both sides found their positions challenged in unexpected ways. One of the earliest and most persistent theories was that the shroud was simply painted. Skeptics pointed to the flourishing of religious relics during the Middle Ages, when entire markets thrived on the sale of sacred artifacts. They argued that a skilled artist could have used pigments and brushwork to create the image of a crucified man. But the AI's microscopic analysis made this explanation harder to sustain. No brushstrokes, pigments, or binders were detected in the image fibers themselves. Instead, the image seemed to be the result of a chemical change to only the very top layers of the cloth's linen threads, which is something paint could not achieve so precisely. Another theory suggested that the image was formed through some kind of primitive photography. This idea gained traction after the shroud's photographic negative was revealed in the late 19th century. The image appeared more detailed and lifelike in negative form than in its natural state, sparking speculation that a medieval forger might have used sunlight and chemicals to produce a kind of proto-photograph. But the AI's findings made this theory less convincing. There was no evidence of light-sensitive compounds in the cloth, and the depth of the image was far too consistent to be the result of uneven exposure to light. A more modern scientific theory proposed that the image was caused by a burst of energy, heat, radiation, or some other unknown phenomenon that imprinted the body's form onto the cloth. This idea gained strength from the AI's observation that the image did not penetrate deeply into the fibers. Instead, it rested only on their outermost surfaces, as though a sudden, powerful pulse had altered them in a fraction of a second without scorching or burning the fabric beneath. Some researchers compared this to the way a laser can alter a material's surface without damaging its core. But the question remained: what natural event could produce such a controlled and instantaneous burst of energy? For believers, the most compelling explanation was that the image was formed at the very moment of Jesus' resurrection. They argued that the burst of energy detected by AI could have been the physical trace of a supernatural event, one that released light or radiation strong enough to leave a perfect imprint of his body on the burial cloth. The idea was not new, but the AI's analysis gave it fresh credibility. Even those who did not believe in miracles were forced to admit that the image was unlike any known human-made artwork or accident. There were also hybrid theories, blending natural science with extraordinary circumstances. Some suggested that certain conditions, such as the chemical environment of a tomb, the decomposition of a body, and rare atmospheric events, could have combined to produce the image naturally. AI data on the cloth's fiber oxidation and micro-level chemical changes lent some weight to these possibilities. Yet, recreating the effect in a laboratory remained elusive. The AI findings had not provided a single, conclusive answer. Instead, they had magnified the mystery. Each theory had strengths and weaknesses, but none could fully explain every aspect of the shroud as revealed by the algorithms. The image was too detailed, too precise, and too shallow in depth to fit neatly into any one category of explanation. As scientists wrestled with the possibilities, one fact became clear. The shroud was not just a relic of faith or a subject for skeptical dismissal, and it was a puzzle that demanded the attention of both. The next question was no longer simply, how was it made, but also, what does it mean? And that was where the debate turned from science to something much more personal like belief. Scientists have debated for decades how the shroud's mysterious image came to be. Some claimed it was painted, but AI analysis found no pigments or brushstrokes, only chemical changes on the linen's outermost fibers. Others proposed medieval photography, yet no light-sensitive materials were detected. A burst of energy theory emerged, suggesting heat or radiation imprinted the image instantly without scorching deeper layers. Believers saw this as possible evidence of the resurrection itself, while skeptics explored rare natural conditions. Still, no theory fits every detail revealed by AI, leaving the Shroud's origin suspended between science, history, and faith. The Shroud of Turin has been studied for centuries, and now, with the help of artificial intelligence, it is revealing secrets no one expected to see. Yet, with every answer comes a dozen new questions. The AI did not close the case, but widened it, adding layers of detail that made the mystery even deeper. One thing is certain: the Shroud continues to challenge the boundaries of knowledge, pulling scientists, historians, and believers alike into its silent, haunting presence. And now, thanks to AI, that presence feels closer, sharper, and more alive than ever before. Is the image a perfect but unexplained relic of the past? Or is it a silent witness to an event so extraordinary that it changed the course of history? Let us know in the comments section. We hope you enjoyed watching this video. Remember to like, share it, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.